The original Hellraiser franchise was strikingly original and inspired horror for decades, even though it quickly, I think, dipped in quality and died out with a whimper. Did the 2022 reboot movie inject new life into the experience for me, or did it fall into the same elements that turned me off? Stick around, and I'll share my thoughts. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions with my uncut review of Hellraiser 2022 on Hulu. The synopsis on IMDb reads, a take on Clive Barker's 1987 horror classic where a young woman struggling with addiction comes into possession of an ancient puzzle box, unaware that its purpose is to summon the Cenobites. What the crap are Cenobites? If you have no idea what that's about, I'll try to give you a little bit of the lowdown as we go through here. I've only watched the first 3 movies in the original Hellraiser series, and so my comparisons should be understood to only have them in mind. I really lost interest after the third movie. As far as what this animal is, what does it feel like? It keeps from those original movies the blend of mystery and horror that I think served them fairly well. It's basically Lovecraftian cosmic horror with a different skin. You know, it's got gory, bloody body horror with, you know, chains and torture, medieval torture type aesthetics, heavy metal types of evil aesthetics, in place of like squid monsters, right? Or goat people or whatever the crap, you know. And the name Hellraiser, I mean, it's really hell in name only, as it bears almost no similarity to hell as described in the Bible anyway, but rather takes inspiration from influential artistic representations of hell. There is decent time given to establishing characters and relationships, which I really appreciated. Those relationships, the motivations of different characters are vital, I think, to the drama and helped me feel the stakes and feel these character deaths more. But there's also plenty of the horrific monster stuff that I think people go to this franchise for, and it ramps up even more in the last 45 minutes. I definitely felt satisfied by the amount of those elements present throughout the movie, especially how they were done, and I'll get to that when I talk about the visuals. Like the original movies, this is not about jump scares, but rather about unsettling imagery, unsettling ideas, this creepy otherworldliness that isn't really explained, as you just leaves you thinking, what the crap am I looking at, you know? And it also stays away from getting cute or having the villains talk too much. That's what really made me stop the original series after the third movie, because in the third movie, Pinhead was just talking way too much. They were revealing and explaining too much about what the Cenobites were, about Pinhead's backstory and stuff, and I just wanted all that stuff to remain an unsettling mystery that's left to my own imagination, because the more you explain things, the less unknown they are, and Lovecraftian horror is meant to leverage the fear of the unknown, and so I think Hellraiser is at its best when it's leveraging that fear of the unknown and the unexplained. And also in the third movie, they started having Cenobites do cute little like catchphrasey type things, starting to sound like Freddy Krueger a bit in the classic Nightmare on Elm Street movies. But no, in this movie, these baddies are not jokey villains like classic Freddy Krueger. They are otherworldly, they are largely unknown, and they are disturbing. The main characters are also thankfully joke-free as far as I can remember throughout the entire movie. This isn't horror that feels the need to lighten the mood with humor peppered throughout. The drama and the horror are both taken seriously throughout the experience, which I so appreciate. There are some lore elements that have changed. The Cenobites, which are basically, I mean, they're sometimes referred to as demons, but I mean, they don't match the description of demons in the Bible at all. There's just these otherworldly, other-dimensional humanoid beings, and that come and take people from our world and take them into a horrible, nightmarish, eternal torture existence. And in the original 3 movies, they were only summoned by genuine desire of some kind on the part of the person manipulating the puzzle, or rather than merely just the mechanics of the puzzle box. In fact, in the second movie, one of the Cenobites even says something to the effect of, "It is not hands that called to us," because someone used kind of an autistic girl that was really good at solving puzzles to figure out the puzzle box for them, but it was really their desire desire to have the puzzle box solved that brought the Cenobites to come and to snatch someone away. But in this one now, the rules are more about the mechanics of solving the puzzle, who gets cut by the blade that pops out of the puzzle. It's much more this kind of technical nature in terms of who is going to fall prey to the Cenobites and their otherworldly designs. But now victims, can just be intentional, or they can be collateral damage resulting from the choices of others. I have mixed feelings about that. I don't know if I prefer one over the other. I think that the first version, it does play into more a theme of cautioning against just pursuing pleasure without any kind of boundaries. It puts the consequences on the person who is, seeking out that pleasure. But as I'll talk about when we get to the thematic section, I think there's some value and there's some real world parallels to doing it this way and having these rules allow quote-unquote innocent people to be affected as well. As far as the cast goes, well, I gotta say, very unlike the original movies, especially the first movie, I found the performances from all actors much stronger. That was a real hard thing to get through, especially in the first movie. Some of that is just because movies were made in a different time with different acting styles, and so they're just not gonna play as well to me today. But some of it, I think, was, just better quality acting going on across the board in this cast. And Odessa, I'm gonna mispronounce her name, Odessa Azayan, I'm gonna guess. She plays the central character of Riley, and she really came across to me as very genuine throughout, almost constantly in this strained or broken emotional state that just brought weight to everything that was going on in her scenes. And so I really appreciated what she brought to the movie. Jamie Clayton plays the new version of Pinhead, which on IMDb is instead identified as the priest, which I think actually the costume design of the original looked a little bit more like a priest than this one did, although this one maybe serves as a priest, because I guess that makes sense, because there ultimately is this dark god type being that they are kind of like the intermediary between this god being, whatever it is, this Lovecraftian type of ultimate power and humanity. So I guess they're a priest in that sense. But anyway, so Jamie Clayton plays this new Pinhead / priest character. Clayton is a biological male who has transitioned to living as a woman, and their voice was also, I think, artificially lowered in post-production, so the casting and the resulting performance, aided by sound effects, creates a chief villain that feels unsettlingly androgynous to me. It reminds me a bit of The Visitors from Gene Roddenberry's Earth Final Conflict TV series. It's a really interesting casting choice here that left me feeling appropriately unbalanced by the priest character, but perhaps unintentionally also allows for thematic comparisons that I think the LGBTQ plus community would largely dislike. But I'll get to that when I talk about the themes. As far as the visuals, the stunts, that kind of stuff, I was so pleased with the amount of practical gore, makeup, and other effects that were used here. There is some CG, but I noticed it more in portraying inorganic objects like the puzzle box or backgrounds and things that would shift around. And there's both variety and implication in the designs of the Cenobites and additional otherworldly elements that probably added up to more visual design content in this movie than in the first two, maybe even three movies combined. So as far as just those creepy, weird, bizarre, gory monster design elements, I felt like this had just a really nice concentration of them in the 2-hour runtime. By the time the credits rolled, I felt like the movie had been really very generous in how much body horror and bizarre visual elements the movie gave me. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about some thematic stuff. Is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in this Hellraiser franchise reboot that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? Well, I think that there's a lot potentially to think or talk about, which is unsurprising to me when dealing with the supernatural horror genre. A lot of times they are, on a very core level, morality plays where, people who do bad, they get killed by the baddie. It's that kind of thing. It's the most virtuous person is ultimately the one that's going to survive, that kind of thing. That's a very classic classic element of how horror scripts are written. And there are other things as well that just lend themselves to the recognition that there is real good and real evil in the world. And so horror, I think, is very underappreciated as a genre by Christians, given how it so often strikingly makes clear there is such a thing as evil, when other genres like sci-fi and fantasy are going to ease back on, evil or evil being in our nature and different things like that. Anyway, there's an interesting exchange here between Pinhead and a character. I'm going to keep it vague. You can skip this part. If you don't want any kind of dialogue represented ahead of time before you watch this movie, you can skip this. I don't think it spoils really the plot. I'm just kind of talking about some dialogue, some words that were exchanged. Pinhead says to a victim, "What is it you pray for?" Because this victim is desperate to survive. They're praying. They're praying the Lord's Prayer. And they manage to get out, as part of their answer, salvation. And Pinhead replies, or the priest, whatever, replies, "And what would it feel like," meaning salvation? "A joyful note? Without change, without end? Heaven? There's no music in that." So the suggestion here is that heaven, the heaven that she longs for, at least from the priest's understanding, is one of this single joyful note that is sustained without change and without end. That is the concept of heaven being presented here. And the priest / Pinhead says, maybe I should just say the Pinhead priest. The Pinhead priest says that there's no music in that. It's just a single note. In other words, no variety. And so I think that's a worthwhile question to ask. Do we ever have a boring concept of heaven? As we think about heaven, what comes to mind? Is it something that we long for? Because really, it is something that we ought to long for and have chief in our minds, that informs our perspective on this life, the brevity of this life, how we should prioritize this life, given what is promised to us. If we have this vague, boring concept of heaven in our minds, we are not going to live this life and make choices in this life in light of storing up rewards for ourselves in heaven. And so, yeah, I think we should definitely challenge any concepts that we allow into our minds that heaven might be boring or unfulfilling or less than in some way. And if you are interested in going on a very biblically based journey exploring what we can know about heaven, I would recommend the book Heaven by Randy Alcorn. It's got some really good material in there. Let's see here. The priest, the Pinhead priest, also says at one point, "There is so much more the body can feel, and you'll feel it all," saying to their victim, "You'll feel it all before we're through," which indicates again this interest in just experiencing all kinds of sensations, pleasurable sensations, just all that we can experience on a sensory level. And when one character asks the Pinhead priest, "Who are you?" meaning who are you Cenobites, Pinhead priest answers, "Explorers in the further regions of experience." I think that's actually a line taken from the first or second movie of the original series. "Explorers in the further regions of experience, of sensation's rim." And then a few phrases later says, I guess that's not really relevant. I was going to say, "Our gifts are boundless." I guess what you get a sense from in these lines is they're pursuing pleasure without any self-restrictions. The Pinhead priest also says at one point that enough is a myth. The very concept of having enough is a myth, that there's always more that ought to be pursued. In terms of experience. So the villains in this movie are those who pursue pleasure and other good sensory experiences without any boundaries or limitations posed upon themselves. This franchise functions, I think, as a cautionary tale against living this way, and subtly, thematically suggests that we should place limits on ourselves as we pursue pleasure and fulfillment in life. Now, the concepts of hell, quote unquote, here are so unbiblical that it doesn't function compatibly with Scripture, but I think it does have some value as something akin to a parable or a metaphor. And I think that this idea of the pursuit of pleasure is a major part of that metaphor. Most of those who fall victim to the Cenobites or become Cenobites are people who are pursuing pleasure without any boundaries whatsoever. This pursuit has left them ultimately empty in the normal human experience, and so they search out more and more strange or forbidden, quote-unquote, pleasures, which ultimately give them pain, that to some extent they even confuse with pleasure because of its novelty. This is actually what happens with those who pursue shallow sexual experiences and enter into sodomy and things like that, or those that are pursuing substance abuse, maybe starting with mild things like alcohol and other more mild substances, but then becoming more and more interested because they're not getting what they want from that in harder substances, in more intense substances, or just people in general pursuing adrenaline-inducing activities and always looking for that next kind of high because they're not quite getting what they want from their current experience. Or maybe they're thinking to themselves, but maybe there's more, maybe there's more. They're always making that the most important thing. And eventually, those things all fall short that people find themselves pursuing sexually or in substances or in adrenaline, and lead to the pursuit of lifestyles that are self-destructive. But this movie also adds, in the first time in my experience in the Hellraiser franchise anyway, again, I've only seen the first three, this movie also adds that those lifestyles have a harmful effect on those around those making such choices. And really, I think that is a worthwhile component because it demonstrates how the pursuit of self-pleasure is not something that merely affects the individual. I think a lot of times today we hear this idea of, hey, as long as you're not hurting anybody else, you do you, right? But I think that if we examine some of those things that normally pop culture would give their blessing to and say, hey, that's just about you pursuing what you want to fulfill you, it's not hurting anybody else, well, is it really not hurting anybody else? And I think if we were to examine many of those choices more deeply and for longer periods of time, we would see that there are negative effects to those around the ones making those choices to pursue those pleasures. So the implication in these movies carried over in this one is that there really should be boundaries in our pursuit of pleasure. However, where those boundaries lie in the minds of the filmmakers is a mystery or perhaps even inconsistent in some ways. Given that the script sympathetically features a gay couple whose relationship I think we're lightly meant to support or at least be okay with, that doesn't seem to be a boundary that they would want to suggest should be imposed. On the other hand, there is a sense in which we're meant to see Riley's shallow sexual relationship with her boyfriend as a sad thing. So my guess is that the filmmakers would say that all sex is fine provided it involves or is building toward a loving, committed relationship. However, using a transgender actor whose performance is further manipulated seemingly to enhance the sense of gender confusion or neutrality, and making this character the ultimate villain who was born out of a boundless pursuit of pleasure seems like an unusual choice. I'd be really interested to know the intention behind that casting and that design for the character, because the net result does not, I think, lend itself to a positive affirmation of pursuing a transgender transition. Anyway, I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, well, this is totally worth your $8 for a month of Hulu, especially with more coming in October from Hulu that you're interested in. It's your kind of unsettling, gory, and monstrous horror, taken seriously from beginning to end and with some good opportunities for reflection throughout. This is one you will almost certainly buy when it becomes available on Blu-ray. It's rated R for strong, bloody horror violence and gore, language throughout, some sexual content, and brief graphic nudity. And a comment on that, it is male genitals. Blink and you'll miss them, it's so fast. Otherwise, nudity throughout the movie is blocked by camera angles or objects. But there is some sexual content. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Hellraiser 2022 on Hulu. Right now, I'd like to take some time to write a tune for pre-made rhyme. The lyrics kind of never change, but the melody gets rearranged. I never know what I'll create to say how much I appreciate Dan, Excel, John, Josh Reading, Gabriel Stinson, Brian Franklin, Olin D. Branham, Drew Rub, Winston Crutchfield, Lee Bray, Justin D. Myers, Cosme Fox, and Joel Nelson. Thank you for supporting me and SPP and CGC. And Man, I need my voice to be digitally altered to make it lower. And now to all who hear this tune, thank you as well. Please come back soon. Want to hear your name and song? Check out our page on Patreon. All right, another month. Another song that I got through. I'd love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. You can get more info about the benefits of joining at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Then I hope you'll check out our podcast and stay connected to all CGC content over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. It is time again for Christian Geek Central's annual Game Save event, fundraising for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, which provides free treatment for children facing life or death circumstances and shares its cutting-edge life-saving research with hospitals all over the world. You're still welcome to join the Game Save team by following the link in the description below. And once again this year, I'm drawing attention to our team's fundraising by performing a 24-hour marathon of video gaming that I will stream live on youtube.com/Christian Geek Central beginning 6 a.m. Pacific Time on Saturday, November 5th. You can donate or get more info by clicking on my fundraising page in the links below, where you'll also find incentives and rewards for doing so. For $5, choose a topic for me to share my sometimes overly strong opinions on during my live stream. For $10, you get the previous reward and a download code for a free copy of the Spirit Blade Special Edition audio drama. For $20, you get the previous rewards and you can choose a game for me to play during my November 5th live stream, pick a favorite, or torture me with something terrible or rage-inducingly difficult. For $30, you get the previous rewards and you can choose a song for me to sing during my November 5th live stream, pick an old favorite of yours, or just make me humiliate and torture myself with something no one wants to hear. And for $50, you get the previous rewards and a download code for every MP3 product at spiritblade.com. That's a $90 value. On top of that, I have set fundraising milestones that will unlock strange and unusual happenings as I reach them. At $200, I'll have a free download day for everyone who visits spiritblade.com on November 12th. And as my total goes beyond $200, I'll unlock increasingly more content for the free download day. And depending on how far beyond $200 my fundraising goes, during my November 5th live stream, I will cover my face in peanut butter and jelly while talking about horror movies, put on a pair of frozen socks and a frozen t-shirt at the same time, shoot water up my nose with a turkey baster, and have my wife Holly play a video game with me for 30 minutes. And if I reach a personal fundraising total of $500 or more, I will resume and complete, before the end of the year, my live stream Let's Play series for Fallout New Vegas as a Terminator. I like your gun. Attempting to do so in a single sitting. That could take as much as 20 hours or more based on how long tobeat.com averages. We will find out together if I reach $500. Finally, if I reach my $500 goal by the end of Thursday, October 20th, I will do a 4-hour live stream before the end of the year, playing only the most frustratingly difficult games in my collection. Since my last Get Good live stream, I've added some more titles to the list that will probably be like beating my face against a wall, and you can bring that about if you help me reach $500 by the end of October 20th. Now, there are some stipulations and time limits on those rewards and milestones, so quickly follow the link below to my fundraising page for all the details. I hope you'll be a part of helping me and the Christian Geek Central Game Save team do some good for some kids who really need it. And then please join me at youtube.com/Christian Geek Central for my 24-hour marathon starting at 6 a.m. Pacific Time on Saturday, November 5th. Hope to see you then.
Oh my gosh. This is all kinds of wrong.